Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, the Big 12 football scheduling scavenger hunt continues. We also talk Red Raider basketball, which means gloom, despair, and agony on me. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be back in the saddle with you on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't yet, so you never miss an episode. You can find it there or anywhere you get podcasts. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, and we are coming to you after, well, another one went the wrong way. Texas Tech falls to Scott Drew in the 21st ranked Baylor Bears from United Supermarkets Arena, still without a conference win, Chris. And while early on, I think at least for me as a fan, there was some thought that, all right, Tech is here to battle. Got a great crowd, great energy in the building, and I thought we may get something kind of back and forth. And, you know, Baylor was really cruel in keeping it just kind of close enough to make you feel like it was a little bit back and forth. But tell me if I'm wrong, man. It really seemed like a ball game that the vast majority of Baylor had it in hand. Did you feel that way? Just kind of a wall that Tech could never break through, it seemed like.
Yeah, Baylor was really cruel, all right. They were really cruel because they have recruited this one-and-done player named Keontae George that was phenomenal. They were really cruel because they have a couple of other guards flanking him, and L.J. Cryer and Adam Flagler that were just phenomenal. I mean, I think Cryer was 4 for 4 from behind the arc. Yep. They were really cruel because they only turned the ball over 3 times. One of which was one of their own guys shot, and it got stuck in that's one of their 3 turnovers.
That's one of the turnovers.
Yeah, that's
Good
right.
Job, D.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but they're just better than you right now, really across the board. I think it's a bad matchup. Is as guard heavy and as talented as they are. I think it's a bad matchup when you are trying to play, 2 bigs or a big in general, because I looked out at one point last night, and you switch everything for the most part. This is what Mark believes in, and it's harder to do with this team, much more so than the last several teams that you've had here, because you have small guys and you have big guys. Okay, there's not a lot of in between with your Texas Tech roster right now, and so what happens is it's like you got Davion Harmon trying to guard Flo Thamba down in the paint, or you have Fardaz Aimaq or Daniel Bacho out above the arc with all kinds of space around trying to guard Keontae George or Cryer or Flagler. And like both of them go, you're just like, okay, hold on. Just somebody say a basketball prayer here and hopefully it's answered. It's just difficult. Those are difficult matchups, but Baylor's really good, man. And I feel like the same thing happened last night as it happened in football. It's like you catch them at the wrong time. Both instances, their football and basketball teams were picked to win the league-ish, okay? And then they both kind of start off slow, and it's like they come to Lubbock and get right, And yeah. But you just, I think you were worried about getting into a track meet with this team just because this is what they want to do. They're comfortable running. Let's go up and down. Let's shoot it. We're going to make more than you are. So, we're cool with that. And you kind of got caught up into that a bit, and you made more threes than they did, and you were way under your average as far as your turnovers were. And yet you weren't really ever in the game, to your point, Cowan. So that's how good Baylor is, because you clearly played it on their terms, not at yours.
Yeah, it just seemed like every time maybe you felt like you had an opportunity to make a run or get it to a one-possession type of situation, they were there with a big 3 or something was happening to kind of keep you at bay. It's like, come on, just blow us out already. Put us out of our misery. You want to do it. We want you to do it at this point in time. Not really but it just felt very it felt like a foregone conclusion, I guess you could say, as to the final score as you kind of progressed later on into the game. But I guess I don't know, Chris, I'd still sit here and ask this question. And after I asked the question, I may duck for cover under the desk for fear of having things launched at me, mostly by my wife, because that's the only other living person in the house right now. But I don't know if she'd agree with this either. She was at the game too, and I don't think she felt that good about it. But here's the question. But first, today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetOnline, the #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get there now and get the latest odds and trends for every league around the world. If you love sports podcasts, also going to find those there at BetOnline. BetOnline, always the easiest, fastest way to keep up with your favorite event, your favorite teams on game day. It's your HQ for live betting stats and scores, now with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more with BetOnline, where the game starts. But here's the question. Where does this game rank among those played by Texas Tech so far this year? Because you just alluded to it there. Statistically, you actually check some boxes, yet you still come up with the loss. But I'm not so sure that this was like, one of the worst outings of the season for the Red Raiders or anything like that. It honestly seemed like you almost kind of put together that formula we've been talking about. You dramatically lessen turnovers. You knocked down some three-point shots, but it still went very wrong for you. Is that just an outlandish thought to have? Am I being too much of a prisoner to statistics, or how do you see that part of it?
Well, I think here's the discouraging thing about what you're saying is that in some ways you could make an argument offensively and with the low turnovers and the made shots and all these things. You could just look at it and go, man, that's about as good as we can play on offense. If you're on that team or coaching it or whatever. That's about as good as we've played or can play. I mean, and maybe there's another level to get to, but my point is, and it wasn't anywhere near good enough. And that's the discouraging thing. But that's where in this particular league, this year, it's just, I mean, I think right now it's just like moral victories that you're trying to feel good about, because the actual result, which is really the only thing that matters, just is so difficult to achieve based on what you are versus what everybody else is. But I mean, I don't disagree with your point in that I thought you kind of matched their level of shot making. I think there's some ill-advised shots that you're taking, but the degree of difficulty was some of the things that you were doing last night on offense, running some ISO plays and things like that. I mean, Jaylon Tyson shooting fadeaway jumpers off in the short corner and like Davion Harmon and some of his shots. I mean, the degree of difficulty, my point is, I wish they counted 4 or 5 points based on degree of difficulty, because maybe you'd had a chance. But yet you matched it, and yet you could just never, because here's the problem, and this is what we talked about. You and I talked about this, I guess it was last week. It's like, okay, where do you start to reset this thing? Where does it have to start? And right now, it's just, this is not a good team on defense. The numbers suggest that. And so because you can't get any stops, it doesn't matter what you're doing on the offensive end. And it's just, they're not like, because I made the comment on the broadcast, Baylor played to their identity. They got up and down. They're in rhythm. They're free flowing. They're just getting after it. It's just like they want to play a game of horse and do it in a fast pace. and this is what happened. You need to try to slow the game down a bit and grind and sacrifice and dive on the floor and all these things. And I just don't think we see enough of that. And I hate to always compare last year's team, but it's like, I knew what that team was. I knew, and again, they weren't perfect and they were flawed because they couldn't score or shoot at times. But man, they had an identity and played to it, and you won 27 games with it. And right now I just don't know if you even have a feel for what your identity is as as this particular team, because it's certainly not on defense.
Fardaz Aimaq gets the start. Chris, were you surprised by that at all, or what'd you make of his night?
Well, I think Coach Adams had alluded to that Daniel Bacho was kind of under the weather the day before, and so I think, but yeah, I guess it's semi-surprised. And this is what's interesting is that now Fardaz has come back. He's averaging 12 a game, goes for 12 points in his second game as well. But yet O'Banner is kind of taking a step back, which you just can't have happen. And then Daniel Bacho is just he's just not the same guy right now that he was prior to him getting sick prior to the new year. It's just like, and I say same guy in that you just don't see the output. He's still active and all those things, but you know, like last night he scores, let's see, 3 points, 3 rebounds. I mean, and there was a time when he was your semi leading scorer.
Yep.
And right now, you know, whether they haven't figured out a good way to use him on offense, whether he's not being aggressive enough, whether I don't know, but it's with Dawes kind of being inserted, you can't have other people kind of regress. It needs to be a good ingredient to sprinkle in, not something that has everybody, because you only have about legitimately like 6 dudes that can score for you night in and night out. And I think we're talking about 2 of them here that aren't playing the best right now, but obviously you've sprinkled in Dawes, who's, I mean, again, he's not perfect, but it certainly adds a different element. But it's hard for him to guard these guards from Baylor, okay, out there all by himself. That's not something that makes me feel real warm and fuzzy. I mean, yeah.
No, I wasn't getting that feeling watching that either. Daniel Bacho, one silver lining, 2 personal fouls. Hey, you know, it wasn't all bad, I guess. Kerwin Walton is alive. He has a pulse. Saw him knocking down shots. He was 4 for 6 from beyond the arc. Gave you 12 points off of the bench. Welcome to the season, Kerwin.
Absolutely. Where have you been, young man? I mean, because the other games that he made multiple threes in was, I think, like Houston Christian, which are up 50 points in that game, and it's at the very end. And I'm trying to remember one of the other non-conference games, because these were the most – it didn't ultimately matter, but these were the most meaningful shots that he's taken and made as a Red Raider. Not even close.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what he was brought here to do. And if you had some normalcy there or some consistency there with him and his ability to do that 1 to 3 times a game, again, it changes the dynamic of your team. It looked like last night he just said, you know what, I'm not going to think about it. If I get any sliver of space, man, I mean, catch and shoot. I mean, and he did. He buried, what was he, 4 of 6, I think.
Yeah.
And he kind of kept you in the game at times when Baylor was ready to try to, it felt like, blow you out and just kind of take it and run.
Yeah.
He kind of kept you within arm's length of it and everything like that. But I'd love to see more, because that's the one skill he possesses he's really good at. If you ever watch that kid shoot when there's nobody around, he can make 30 or 40 in a row and not even break a sweat. But that's not how the game's played. You got to have 9 other breathing human beings out there that are playing against you or with you. And so, but yeah, he throws them up if they start going in. I mean, yeah, but you needed it bad. But hopefully we can keep that going.
And we did get some more of what we asked for on the last episode, and Jaylon Tyson with another double, man, 19 and 12. And I just think he just appears from the outside looking in to be playing maybe with some more confidence for whatever reason. I don't know.
I think so. And I think, again, we touched on this, like there's different ways to help your team, and it's not always about, making shots. But if he'll continue to embrace this rebounding thing, I mean, again, it's in some ways a sign of maturity, because rebounding sometimes is not the fun thing. It's the
necessary thing.
Yes. Yes. That's right. And I just think that it's because that's where I look at this team and I say, who's sacrificing for the team? Like who's willing to rotate over and take the charge, or who's diving on the floor after a loose ball? Who's not worried about scoring? These are all fair questions to ask as it relates to kind of like committing to trying to get this thing fixed. Because it's going to take, and there's no magic formula. You just keep grinding away at it, man, and like keep trusting with what you're doing, and you keep trying to push through. And it's hard because you want immediate results. And this is probably a good lesson in life for some of these kids that have probably never dealt with losing in a lot. I mean, I could just tell you, I doubt very seriously Jaylon Tyson, speaking of who we're talking about, in his prep career, like high school, AAU, whatever, this is just not somebody that lost many games. Kevin O'Banner has always been on a winning team at Oral Roberts and now at Texas Tech. Pop Isaacs was a big-time AAU stud. He just wasn't on. Lamar Washington, same. I mean, it's just all these kids, you look at it, this is probably their first dose of like, this is humbling. This is something that, is I've never dealt with before. I don't know how to feel, how to act, or what I'm supposed to do to get myself out of it. But it's not going to get any easier, Casey. I mean, it's just not. I mean, you're about to go to Manhattan, Kansas, and heck, man, they're in first place and just knocked off the defending national champs, the Jayhawks, in overtime, and their coach is standing on the scores table with a microphone, and everybody's cheering and everything like that. So you're about to go into a hornet's nest on Saturday against Kansas State.
That was the coach? I thought that was Howard Dean saying, we're going to take back Michigan, and we're going to take back the White House. Yeah! Maybe I need to rewatch the film. And if you're interested possibly in recruiting guys who are not so concerned with scoring, do you need to recruit more married men? Maybe a question that you want to ask yourself when assembling a roster. There are times where I wonder, like, did the box out go extinct in the game of basketball? Because once upon a time,
but you have to go back to the married men thing. Like, what do you mean by that? I want more details there.
Well, you said you may have guys that are too concerned with scoring. That's an individual's game. That's a single man's perspective.
I thought I picked up on that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna make him. Yeah, that was.
It's basketball analysis.
Yeah, there
Chris.
we go.
That's
I love it.
It's basketball analysis.
Well done.
But do you see? Like, I love the box out. I was a fan of boxing out. I wasn't big, but I was slow and could barely jump over daylight as a player. So I had to box out. I enjoyed putting my ass right in the middle of somebody and just clearing the space. Did it all the time. Did it very effectively. And then I get on a little older and I'm watching. I remember my youngest sister play high school and lower level college basketball. And of course it's women's basketball. So what can you really take away from it? Nothing. But I thought, none of these people box out. Where are all the box outs? And these are ladies we're talking about where you got that trunk, kind of in a different way than a man's built. No boxing out. I'm watching men's college basketball now. I'm thinking, where is the box out? Where is the box out? I mean, there were several times last night, Chris, I'm watching Tech players doing the thing that you yell at like little dribblers for, looking and watching. You're looking up. You're like reaching. I mean, there are Tim Burton-esque characters in Baylor jerseys, the longest sons of bucks you ever seen, all around you, and your strategy is to look up and reach. Like, the thing that made me think about that, Chris, is when you talk about sacrifice, who's sacrificing your body, who's doing things that are like dirty work, and that's dirty work. And I don't know if we're just watching like a bunch of scorers who aren't used to having to rebound or like work to rebound or what it is exactly. But I really think there is something to the thought of not as many dogs being in Tech jerseys this year, not as many guys who are willing to do maybe some things they haven't had to do to be good basketball players up to this point in their career. But I don't see that like I feel like we used to. And you mentioned the word charge. What is that? Huh? When's the last time you're collecting a handful of charge? I mean, you were like taking charges at a record-setting pace as a program, it seemed like once upon a time. And I almost feel like that's gone the way of the dodo bird too. There's just these little things that make for good basketball teams that unfortunately you're not seeing as a part of your program as often as you like, or at least I feel like I'm not. Am I wrong, or what do you see?
Well, Well, and that I think what I hear you saying is taking charges, pounding people on the glass, being connected on defense. That was identity. That was who you were. That was like every fiber. That was your culture. Okay. And right now, I don't know what that is. You've totally changed your entire roster pretty much. I mean, because these are your culture guys right now. Kevin O'Banner, KJ Allen, Daniel Baccio, and Jaylon Tyson, who didn't even play. Those are the only four guys that were around anybody, last year's team that kind of understood expectations. This is what we do. This is what the expectation is. This is how we're going to roll. And O'Banner's just not. He's not really emerging as your best player right now, and it kind of needs to be. That's what they talked about yesterday before the game. Look, we're going to be in this game, but can we finish it? Can we make the plays at the end to get over the hump or to hold a team off and win it? And that's where your alpha has to come, step up and like make plays for you and either shots or defensive stops, whatever it may be. And O'Banner is just right now, it seems like he's just kind of, there's just not a lot of production there. And I think that's a concern because I look at, we mentioned this the other day. I look at Gabe Kalsher for Iowa State, Keontae George, and Baylor's got two or three of these guys, Keontae George, Cryer, Flagler, all those guys. But who's your guy when it's on the line? Who's making the play for you? Who's finishing a game? Who's the closer? I just don't know what the answer to that is, and that's the problem. But to your point, yeah, I just think that you lack identity. You lack what everybody thought about you as. I mean, look at the KenPom ratings, and where you were defensively, which is a really good defensive efficiency kind of tell on how well you're playing. And charges taken for. I mean, you're just not beating anybody in this league if you can only force 3 turnovers. Just call it what it is. I mean, and in some ways, it's shocking that the game was that close that you only forced 3 turnovers. Really, I say forced 3. Really, you just forced 2 because the third one was self-inflicted. But
that counts. It's in the turnover column.
But you know what I'm saying? I mean, that was another thing. That was part of your identity and culture you're forcing teams into 17, 18, 19 turnovers a game because they're like this defensive blitz. We can't, the passing lanes are clogged up. Everybody's rotating over. It's like they're crushing us on the glass. And then when we try to drive, it's like there's 3 guys right there ready to take a charge. And you just don't see a lot of that. And so, and maybe it is a bunch of individual parts or individual scores. I don't know, but it's a younger group that doesn't know what they don't know. But I don't mind telling you, I miss the maturity of last year's team a lot. I miss the way they sacrificed for each other. And again, they were not perfect, man, but they had an identity, and boy, that was a fun group.
Oh yeah, they had an identity, and I'm cringing at the guys that you named as our culture guys this year. And no disrespect to them, I'm not saying through any fault of theirs, but these were not central figures to that identity even a season ago. When you're talking about guys like O'Banner or Baccio or KJ Allen, they're complementary guys. And I know there's a big difference between like Baccio and O'Banner, but you get the point. We don't have to drive that into the ground. But yeah, you're right, man. I mean, 3 turnovers, good grief. I think the Washington Generals typically force more than 3 turnovers in their games. And you know what their record is. It stinks. I really hope, Chris, that we continue to see what I thought I saw still in that game, which was a basketball team that I took to be playing hard. And if nothing else, that's the thing that you cannot give up on, because if you do that, then the season's toast. And I know some expectations are toast right now already as we sit here and have this conversation. But if you ever hope to have any sliver of momentum or anything enjoyable about this season, you must continue to battle. And I did think we saw a team show up, but yeah, now you're on the road. So you get into this us against the world type of messaging. I would imagine you've got to really come together. So best of luck doing that in Manhattan, Kansas. And the Octagon of Doom or whatever. I think it's returned to a doomish octagon nowadays.
Yeah, it's well, they're back. They're feeling good about things. Yeah, I mean they because this has typically been a tough place to play.
Yeah.
But now they've got because I think a lot of Jerome Tang. I was surprised. He was with Scott Drew at Baylor for 19 years. This was the 1 and 1A here. I mean, they were just kind of together, and I thought a lot of Jerome Tang, and I was curious, how much does his departure hurt Baylor? And obviously with what I've just seen, not a lot, but I think it certainly has helped Kansas State because I think he's a real deal. He's kind of in a way, I kind of view him as kind of the basketball version of Joey in some ways. He's very energetic, kind of paid his dues. And I will say this about Coach Tang. I'm surprised that he's had multiple chances to take jobs and take head jobs. I was surprised that Kansas State was the one that he was like, okay, now it's time. Now that this is the one I'm gonna jump on this one because it's a hard job, man. I've been to Manhattan, Kansas many times. I'm telling you, what Bill Snyder did there in football is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, there is not a whole lot going on in Manhattan, Kansas. There is just, I mean, you can see for a long ways, 360 degree. I mean, it's just, and it is windy. There's just not a whole lot going on there at all. So, but they will support it. And right now they're really excited and they just beat their rival, in Kansas. So they've got a couple of really good guards and they're going to be much. Here's the scary thing. They're very similar to what Baylor wants to do because they just put up 116 on Texas a week ago or so. I mean, so they get up and down the floor in a hurry and they would love to get in a track meet with you because they feel like, hey, we're better at it than you are, and they're probably right in your case. It's like I was looking up O'Banner. We're talking about like identity and your closers. O'Banner was 4 of 8 from 3, against Kansas. Okay, so if we eliminate, and he scored 26 points. If you take that game out, and the other 5 Big 12 games, he's 1 of 14 from 3. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is like he's the leading scorer. He was your culture guy. He's thought to be like, okay, you need to go be an all-conference guy for us, and it's just not happening for you right now. And all these double-doubles he had in college, in the NCAA tournament in college. Yeah, hello. In the NCAA tournament in a row. Right now, like last night, 10-2. Or 10-4. But he's not doing the rebounding part of it at the level that we were used to seeing when you were winning big-time games that really meant a whole lot. So, and I'm not picking on him. I'm just saying there's just certain things that have to happen that you just need more out of certain guys because, you can't ask some of those freshmen to squeeze more out of those guys because they're just overwhelmed right now.
And the reality is, in this day and age of college sports, we're talking about well-compensated individuals as well. And
there's that, yeah.
I don't shy away from that also fueling expectations because you want to grab the bag, well, get ready to carry the load of grabbing that bag, I suppose. And maybe we'll find an opportunity to find a little success for O'Banner, the Red Raiders, and the bigger picture before the season is done. We'll have a little more time here this week to get you set for Red Raiders and Purple Wildcats from Manhattan coming up, as Chris mentioned, this weekend. Before we are out of here today, we've got some time to talk Big 12 football. Scheduling promised, scheduling delivered? Not quite. Have they given us a new projection? Yes, somewhere near the end of the rainbow is the latest report. So we'll get to some thoughts on a football schedule someday making an appearance possibly. Coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Where it's your team every day with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Always appreciate being your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get them casts. Chris, before we're done today, Big 12 football scheduling has been the pursuit of the century. It is like the DB Cooper of football schedules. One to remember. We thought around this time, we thought Tuesday, January 17th, and I guess we thought wrong because you and I are sitting here on the other side of it, and we don't have a Big 12 football schedule.
Yeah, so about 2 or 3 weeks ago, this was originally the 17th was supposed to be the date when it was announced, and which has since passed. So what you've got here is that I don't know the context, and that's arguably the most important thing here. I don't understand the context or the reasoning. There clearly is this. I just don't know what it is. This has to do, the delay here has to do with Oklahoma and Texas and like in the negotiation of their exit or early exit or whatever. Couple of things. Do I think that Oklahoma and Texas are out of the league like right now and like they're not going to be on the schedule next year? No, I don't think that is the case. I think that they'll be on, be in the Big 12 for one more year. But I don't know what the haggling over like what this is involved here and why, because I've tried to ask a few questions of people that I think would know. Have they kind of changed the schedule, based on kind of how it was put together and all that? In other words, are people complaining, certain people, and like, okay, well, let's tweak this, let's tweak that. I don't get the sense that is what the case is, but I also don't understand what the holdup is here. However, to really sum it all up, what I can tell you is this. I think that the conference's contract with the television partners, so in this case, ESPN, Fox, and everybody else, you are obligated to put that schedule out by February the 1st. So I saw that the Baylor athletic director indicated on a radio interview yesterday, yeah, it'll be out by the end of January. Well, that's why he's saying this, because at this point, it has to be out by February 1. So I would guess January 31st or sooner is when you're going to get your Big 12 schedule. And again, I really don't know what the holdup is. I don't know if not much has been changed. I don't know what deals are being made or what the hang up is here. Because at some point pretty quickly, the TV partners, they have this draft to where they start looking at league games and then they start slotting them and all those kinds of things. And it's not just the Big 12, it's all these conferences. It's kind of, there's stories out there you can read about how the whole thing is put together to try to maximize everybody's TV revenue and ratings, and you're guessing how teams are going to be good, all this kind of stuff. So anyway, but I mean, Tech can't sell season tickets yet. I mean, you don't know when homecoming is. Nobody does. I mean, at all these schools, the academic calendar can't really be set. I mean, there's a lot that revolves around the football schedule, and everybody's just kind of in a holding pattern right now.
So it kind of sounds like, you saying that people kind of going back and forth on, we want this, no, change this, we don't like this, is not necessarily the reason for the holdup. So can I take that to mean, as a Tech fan, that what you have shared with us about your thoughts on Tech's possible schedule still remaining probable or probably true? I guess nothing's changed there, probably.
That's what I believe. But again, I just don't. I think you have to be careful in saying this is the schedule.
Right.
But so I'm clear. No Oklahoma schools on your schedule next year. I don't believe you're playing Cincinnati, and I don't believe you're playing Iowa State. That's what I've kind of been led to believe. So that's because there's going to be, the way the math works, that's the 4 teams that you're not, that you're not going to play. I believe those are the 4 that you're not going to play. But that doesn't mean that that's right. That's just kind of what I've led to believe. And then there's been because here's a weird one. I kind of hear that Houston is coming back here to play in back-to-back years. The Houston Chronicle reported, I don't know, it's probably been a couple of months ago that Texas Tech was going to play in Houston. and that they were going to open up against Texas. I mean, they had a few tidbits about Houston's schedule, did the Houston Chronicle, but I get different info. So again, who's right? I really don't know. I'm just ready to see it and start to digest it, because this is the latest it's ever. I mean, we're 2 months going to end up being about 2 months late at this point compared to when we normally get a football schedule, because usually you get it in early December, and that's where this is one of the first times too, Casey, that Brett Yormark has said something and it hasn't actually happened yet, because he's given you a couple of timetables and the can keeps getting kicked down the road a little bit, and for the first time too, we don't really know why. Like, what's maybe eventually we find out, and he's like, well, here's why it took so long. Here's what we were trying to work through. I've heard everything from Oklahoma doesn't want to play any of the new, the new members. I've heard everything from this involves with the negotiation of their exit. And I don't know if any of that is true. These are just theories. These are just people. I mean, so who the heck knows? But there's a reason it's being held up, and I just don't know what that is. But I do think it somehow revolves around Oklahoma and Texas.
If there is any acquiescence whatsoever to request from these jackwagons that are leaving, I'm going to be highly frustrated, because I'd already kind of reconciled in my mind, all right, well, the Big 12 can't go, negative on them in the sense that we would say, not only are you playing the new members, you're traveling to all the new members. We may send you to Cincinnati twice just as one final screw you. But I thought, no, that'd be silly. You're not going to take out anything personal on these guys. Yet there's some possibility that they personally are still throwing their weight around. I mean, I would honestly believe it. So God only knows, and maybe somebody will write a great book about it at some point in the distant future, and we'll find out some of these things. But it's been fun to laugh at. I've never made so much of a schedule release. I traditionally may just walk up to the damn stadium some days and say, honey, remind me who we're about to take on here, if you would. But here we are, months and months away, trying to still figure out what's going on. And I'll tell you what, I kind of like it for this reason, Chris. I'm sitting at United Supermarkets Arena watching that game between Texas Tech and Baylor, and I'm just thinking, football is 100 years away from returning to my sports world like I so desperately want it. And here's something that makes it not seem that far away. A schedule not being released, right? You feel like you're just describing all the things you still got to get in place there. You feel like, man, this is just around the corner. We need a schedule. And that's a reassuring feeling when you're thinking about being winless in Big 12 conference basketball play, right? Yeah. It's all mind tricks.
Mind games. Yeah, that's right.
Placebos and whatnot.
I do know this. This is probably something we should talk about in one of the shows later this week or whatever. But you're starting to see people put together like lists for next year as far as like non-conference games, and just start to purse through the schedule a little bit. I mean, your game versus Oregon, which is going to happen, that's going to be your first home game, I believe, in the second week in September. That's one of the top non-conference games that exists right now for next season, based on the rankings and everything like that, because I think both teams are supposed to be or projected to be ranked in the top 15, top 20, somewhere around there. But you do know that game is going to happen. I saw a list where that was like the 9th best non-conference game in the country for next season, just in general, which is, and it got me to thinking, this is one of the most, or will be one of the most high profile, meaningful non-conference games that you've had around here in a long time. And it's not like there's some rivalry versus Oregon, but it'll mean it kind of resonates nationally, because if both teams are ranked, you can kind of start to like, well, you eliminated these guys from the national title hunt, early or whatever. I mean, there'll be some of those conversations, or you've put, a huge win on your resume. But it's like the rest of the games. We just don't know when and where and all those things. But we do know about going to Wyoming. We do know about hosting Oregon for what would be your first home game, and one of just 6 home games next year for you.
Yeah, we know about Wyoming, we know about Oregon, and we know there's some other crumb bum school out there on the schedule already. I just don't know who exactly, because who cares? It's one of those wear a ski mask at the ticket-taking gate kind of games. Maybe free 6-pack for everybody that's got a ticket, something that'd be appropriate for a game like that. Do you know, just one final challenge before we wrap up. Do you know who that third game is off the top of your head? Chris Level.
No.
Good man.
Okay.
Good man. And this man is ate up with tech sports like no one else, ladies and gentlemen. But even he does not know who that opponent is.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know. But
No, you should be embarrassed if you knew. That would mean you truly had a sickness this far out that we're playing Joe Blow directional in week number 3. I just gave away the surprise. Spoiler alert, it is Joe Blow directional you. My bad. All right. Thanks for joining us once again on Locked On Texas Tech. As I mentioned, we got time still to get you set for Red Raider Hoops this weekend. We'll get to Tech and K-State before we wrap up the week. Chris?
It's Tarleton. It's Tarleton State.
Man, come on, Tarleton. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be kicking Tarleton around. I got buddies that are proud Tarleton grads, and they're a tough bunch down there, too.
Yeah. Stephenville, man.
Yeah, man. Tough bunch of Cowboys down there. Not a bunch I want to get on the wrong side of. Sorry about that, partner. Yeehaw. Chris, yeehaw to you as well. Thanks for the time and the insights as well. We'll get through this together, my man.
Yes, we will. We'll keep grinding and keep bringing you what we can, as much as we can. So keep hope alive, everybody. Appreciate you joining us today.
I'm glad you said it that way because we don't want to make too many promises about what we can bring you, but we will bring you, as Chris Level said, what we can. Put it on a T-shirt. All right, we'll see you on the other side for another edition. Always appreciate being your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, and we hope that you'll make Locked On College Basketball your second listen, your one-stop shop for all things college hoops right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. That's Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Callan. We'll see you next time around on Locked On Texas Tech.